Alright guys, so it seems as though the very first My Hero Academia chapter of the new year has found its way to us a bit early. The central focus of it being the initial aftermath of the war, and it is pretty damn sad. With the last one, we saw Deku recognize his new quirk to be the fourth user's Danger Sense. Meanwhile, Mirio was rushing into action and managed to knock out Mr. Compress, but before making it to Spinner and Shigaraki, while within the Marble of Compress, Spinner began to place a severed, now charred hand over Shigaraki's face. A sensation that stimulated his most base desires and instincts, as he would then bellow out a powerful cry that beckoned the near high-end Nomu via radio waves. Only this was no longer Shigaraki, but rather All For One, who now possessed an even greater hold over his pupil. And with the aid of the Nomu, he, along with Spinner, Dabi, and Skeptic, who was particularly clarified on Twitter to actually be there, fled the scene. However, in latching onto him briefly with the use of Froppy-style Black Whip, Deku was able to exchange some parting words with the figure before being blasted away, as he would then reflect upon the expression of Shigaraki within One For All, which, despite the many unforgivable atrocities that he's committed, looked as though he himself needed saving as well. With the latest chapter, we would learn that all able-bodied heroes would make their way towards the scene of our chaotic battle. The likes of Pixie Bob, Wash, Present Mike, and 13, whose face was partially exposed for the first time as her helmet had been somewhat broken, all did their very best to suspend Shigaraki's retreat. Unfortunately, by way of One For All's shrewd tactical mind, the near high-end Nomu were conducted in such a way that with the sacrifice of a mere 3, Shigaraki was able to escape, with he, the League, and the remaining 7 Nomu managing to do so undetected. Following this, both Gigantomachia and Mr. Compress would be detained. Compressed then receiving immediate medical attention, and so for now at least, the man still lives. I honestly didn't imagine that this would be the case, but with it being as such, I can only imagine that Horikoshi still yet has a purpose for him to fulfill within the story. As for Gigantomachia, I must admit my disappointment. Machia, since his introduction, was paraded to be calamity given form. The villains essentially have a Hulk at their disposal. But between the buzzkill that was his coloration reveal from the anime, which pretty much confirmed him to be just a big naked caveman with a radio necklace, and the fact that beyond being what is pretty much a kaiju monster, he doesn't do anything, I'm a little bummed out. Without instruction, Machia cannot function, and so for the foreseeable future, he'll just be like an Alexa when nobody is home. After that, we would have the scene of the Mountain Team as an exhausted Redestro and Edgeshot would be shown to us, followed by Cementoss and others in the same shape as Goten, the Iceman, was encased in cement, with tears streaming down his face. And listen, I said this before the war even started, and I want to say it again. Cementoss is slept on like crazy. This man is low-key so powerful it is insane. And certainly corroborated by the fact that he managed to take down someone like Goten that had so thoroughly trained and perfected their quirk. I mean, Dabi couldn't even handle Goten, so kudos to Cementoss, man. But with Goten, Redestro, Trumpet, all the frontline fighters, and everyone there for the meeting, a grand total of nearly 17,000 people were detained, and that is an insane force. How the heroes managed such a feat is beyond me, and I've been covering this stuff the whole way. However, even with such high numbers, there were still over 100 villains still at large, some of which actually being particular figures of interest, which I guess I am a little bit happy about. As to begin this war, Horikoshi blessed us with some really interesting character designs, which actually seemed like they would get their shine around when Kaminari was made to step up to the plate, but ultimately never really did. And so if that sort of potential is still out there to some extent, I can't help but be a little bit happy. In regards to their various branches scattered across the country, apparently their supporters were overpowered. Now, how exactly they had been weeded out so thoroughly, I'm not entirely sure. The reports of Hawks must have been remarkably thorough. Now, Sue and Uraraka, having encountered her previously, relayed the intel that Toga was still at large to Ryukyu's agency. Now, this is bound to be interesting, because with Shigaraki and the League being in hiding, how will she be able to find them? But then again, if any member of the League is to be out and about, she's probably the ideal candidate as someone who can assume the form of others. Once again, I'd like to remind you all that the question she presented to Uraraka was one she also intended to ask of Deku, so maybe we'll get a bit of that. And seeing as how despite the carnage Deku was able to recognize the vulnerability and humanity within Shigaraki, he may have the sort of response that she is looking for. But anyways, the havoc these villains have left in their wake is just horrendous. A young boy was trapped beneath a bit of rubble and debris as his sister would try her best to save him. Accepting his own demise to come, he would go on to promise her his Endeavor pouch, which is of course Horikoshi throwing salt onto an already gaping wound, as the little girl with tears pouring from her eyes would refuse, as all she wanted was her brother to be with her, as more rubble would fall down just above her, as Sue and Uraraka would swiftly manage to save the two of them just in the nick of time. The two children then being comforted and taken care of by them. And listen man, although the situation may be grave, I am really proud of these two characters. Actually being heroes out in the field and saving real lives, it is such a step up from previous arcs in that respect. And it wouldn't stop there, as Uraraka would then go off to help others as a terribly injured man would call out to her to save his wife, who was still inside a now crumbling building. She went as fast as she possibly could and did it. She saved another life as she intended to do all that she could in the face of this travesty. And she wasn't alone. There were plenty of other heroes doing their part to save lives. But as she did this, she would hear a single man's resignation. Now looking to him, herself exhausted, she would see him stand there, still, expressing that being a hero, it was a mistake. The destruction was extensive. It favored hell on earth more than it did any shred of society, as he would just look coldly towards it all. The sounds of burning and broken buildings crashing against the ruined streets would pair with the cries of the misfortunate as if in a symphony conducted by the devil himself. Uraraka would only look to this man without hope in what was a gut-wrenching panel. The desecration of a dream, this is what that was, as this pro-hero would think of finding a new profession. But the pain wouldn't yet subside, as in the mountains, pools of tears would flow from the eyes of our young heroes who looked at the defiled body of their late teacher, Midnight. Midnight, who had died in the line of duty after being converged upon by a group of villains. A truly despicable end to such a kind and selfless hero. Shigaraki died. Shigaraki should have stayed that way. Even with the jolt of electricity that he received, it shouldn't have been enough to return him to the living. What did bring him back, however, was his tenacity. This unwavering aspiration for unbridled destruction claimed countless lives. Midnight, X-Less, Majestic, Crust, Native, and many, many more. Now, to be honest, with the exception of Midnight and to some extent Crust, this list is made up of background characters, some of which you may recognize from various points across the series. And even when it comes to Crust, as far as I'm concerned, he was created for this very purpose, to be a member of the top 10 heroes that would die valiantly. Midnight is the only character here that we truly knew, and although she herself isn't the biggest character ever, this hurts, and in knowing that she got super violated makes it even worse. Knowing that this is yet another one of Aizawa and Present Mike's childhood friend taken too soon, and by this specific group in particular, is just so awful. Following this, we would then have gossip related to Endeavor flood the streets. These people, they're scared and confused, and at that, it seems like Dabi's plan is going into effect just as he had desired it to. There are people believing this to be the end of society as they know it, questioning if they should abandon ship while they can, expecting a thorough explanation to come, as we would get a glimpse of the bloodied and unconscious bodies of Endeavor and Deku. Following this, however, we would then get to grade schoolers we may recognize from the makeup license exam, as one would question their safety, as the other would say that they'll be just fine. since that is what 5 weenies, aka Shoto, told them before. And I feel like Horikoshi added this to provide a bit of optimism back out there, that if nothing else, the future heroes to bear the torch have a chance to correct things going forwards. But even still, that optimism would not last very long, as Horikoshi would put his Tims back onto our necks with a shot of Tartarus and All For One, who would think to himself that he can feel it. That despite being a bit off course, soon enough everything that he desired would come to pass. The spirit of All For One then speaking aloud from Shigaraki's body, as if to the whole of society itself, would say that they shouldn't assume there to be a tomorrow for them, that he won't give them even a moment's rest, as for now at least, it is still his turn. Then commanding his inexhaustible Nomu to go forth and free his main body. And that was the chapter, absolutely chilling. With the conclusion of the war comes the beginning of the prison break. This is something that we have anticipated for quite some time. But listen, just as my belief that it would come to fruition began to wane a bit there, here we are with the man himself making it so. My Hero Academia isn't playing any games. Really and truly, there is no one who can stop this from happening now. And although I didn't expect it to happen now, what better time is there really? Do you mean to tell me that the primary reasoning behind this conflict was to destabilize society to such an extent to which All For One would then be able to take center stage and stake his claim over the country? That is beyond 3D chess. All For One is truly a revoltingly brilliant man. Guys, I need to know how you're feeling, and if need be, feel free to let your tears rain in the comments. My Hero Academia looks to be kicking the new year off terribly in all the right ways, and hopefully you enjoyed the video enough to like and subscribe with notifications on, so you can be with us for all that is to come, because it seems to be pretty crazy. And if you'd like to support us even more, we do have a Patreon page you can find down in the description. And you'll want to be here because when it comes to bringing you some of the best My Hero Academia content on the platform, Plot Armor has you covered. As always, I'm Sliceable Otaku. Thank you all so much for watching and have an awesome day. I love you.